Happy New Year! What's up, guys? Welcome to my Meta Deck Tech number 3. I'm GrincherZ, your host as always, and I'd like to talk to you today about the deck that I used to finish off the December season in the top 50 S rank. I think I finished in at number 32 in no small part to this deck, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. First off, the list is my control Faie, like I said. This is a deck that relies heavily upon controlling the board, and it was very good at stalling games out for a late game win condition, usually involving multiple minions on the board and a couple of handy hits with the White Asp, or finishing them off with Meltdown. Now, this was a really fun deck to play because it had a lot of elements that I guess Vanar didn't typically have before Rise of the Bloodborne. They didn't have a whole lot of AoE control, and they didn't have a lot of, ways to stall the game out without, making yourself very vulnerable to things. Like Gravity Well used to be a good way to stall things out, and you could argue that Icy was a decent effect, but for the most part they were just a single target removal faction. And while that is a good strength to have alone in Duelyst, sometimes, getting to that late game stage, it didn't matter because your win condition wasn't quite solid enough. You oftentimes you would rely on Faie's Bloodborne spell to do a lot of chip damage, and if they out-healed it or if they just out-raced you, you pretty much fell flat. So this was a very fun and challenging deck to put together, and it came together quite nicely after quite a few iterations. At first I was experimenting with Sleet Dasher. Let me just hide that for a sec. Sleet Dasher, I was experimenting a variant with this, combine that with Boundless Courage. And, on paper it seems really nice, but in practice, when you're playing Sleet Dasher, I found it was like a zero tempo play. And by that I mean you're just playing a minion and hoping it sticks. And that wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough in a control list. In the late game, it was a pretty poor top deck. I mean, albeit it's a nice minion, it's just... It usually needed multiple cards to get its full effect, like Hearth Sister to get it into position, or Boundless Courage so it didn't just lose all its value, or go 1-for-1 or 2-for-1 or something like that, because you need it to be exceptional value when you play it. But that changed, and I started tooling around with just more 3-ofs. Like I went to 3 Enfeebles and 3 Sojourners, and took out the Boundless Courages and added in things like Dancing Blades. It just felt really solid overall. So let's go over the deck. I've got the list here pulled up for you. You'll notice that it's 5,080 spirit, so not too heavy. Now, while that also, it uses a lot of cards from the expansion. So if you're fortunate enough to be purchasing the expansion, which was only $20, very good purchase. You get all the cards in it, 3 of each. You can't craft them anyway, so really good value. It uses 3 Frigid Coronas, also 3 Enfeebles, and 3 Concealing Shrouds, which are all from the Rise of the Bloodborne. It also features 2 Meltdowns from Rise of the Bloodborne. So if you got the expansion perfect, this deck will work great for you. If not, I'm sorry, this deck tech will not be very useful to you, but hopefully our next one will be more friendly for non-expansion players. I'm looking forward to doing lots of content like that. But, so anyways, you'll notice that the curve is fairly low. We have a lot of 2-drops, 18 to be precise. And now that's not exactly 18 2-drop minions, but we have 18 2-mana cards. And 9 of those are based into spells. 3 Chromatic Hold's pretty standard. Concealing Shroud is the new addition. And Frigid Corona. Now, the power of this deck was actually more focused on the early game than it was in the late game, even though it's a control deck. In order to combat the early game pressure of other decks like, say, Tempo Argion or Starhorn or Aggro Magmar or something like that, those decks really came out strong in the early game, and that is something I wanted to make sure that I wasn't lacking in. I experimented with a lot of 2-drops, and I found that this was the mix that I was most happy with. There were some other... I tried Snow Chaser, I tried Gravity Wells, but I found that overall, those weren't making a big enough impact in the game. I've also tried Primus Fist to help things out, and I think I was even contemplating Shiro at one point, but and Azure Herald. But overall, this is the mix that I went with in the end, because I found that a lot of these power plays can be resultant off of my Crystal Cloakers. Crystal Cloaker is such a strong 2-drop. It's basically a Windblade Adept, but people won't treat it like a Windblade Adept until you have it in Infiltrate. So as soon as it is in Infiltrate, it just becomes a 4/3 that trades phenomenally, which is, exceptional. If you can 1-for-1 against a minion of higher mana, you're getting more value than your opponent is, and your cards are counting for more. So I really enjoyed the Crystal Cloaker, because when you combine it with Hearth Sister, the opponent won't be expecting it. So that means you can push for extra damage on the face if they're playing too slow, which is great, or you can trade really well. So Crystal Cloaker was an all-star as this deck came together. Blood Tier Alchemist is, I think, probably one of the best cards in the game right now. Any serious deck, besides some very heavy control decks, I think this card is a 2 to 3 of in just about every list these days. Lots of players are utilizing it, which means that not only is your Blood Tier good because of its nature, of its ping, its extra damage, its removal potency, but also just because it can counter other people's Blood Tier Alchemists. So, you got that going for us. It also has great synergy with Enfeeble. And I'm sorry if you guys are hearing that wind blowing. It's like crazy weather today. So if that's picking up, sorry, I just apologize in advance. It also has great synergy with Enfeeble, like I said. Blood Tier plus Enfeeble. All minions become 1/1, which is one of the new Rise of the Bloodborne cards. That means that Blood Tier can just kill it outright. So great value. It's just a great reaching tool as well, and once again, great for controlling the early game. So we got Aspect of the Fox here, and Chromatic Cold, which are pretty staple. While I'm also running the 3 Enfeebles, I didn't feel like it was. I didn't feel like I could be solely reliant upon the Enfeeble, because it does have the downside of making my own minions 1/1. So if I'm ahead on board, but they play a bomb that I gotta answer, and my only card in the deck is to use Enfeeble, well, they just got a lot of value off of playing the big minion that I needed to answer. So I wanted the Aspect of the Fox because it just gives me that extra tool in certain matchups, like Lionar, for example, where they play a lot of single minions, or it also, it's useful against cards like Amara Healer from Vitruvian or Obelisks as well, if you really need to deny the Obelisk Dervish spawns. And overall, just a great card. So we're taking lots of single target removal. And I want to talk a little bit about Concealing Shroud and Frigid Corona while we're here. Concealing Shroud has been an amazing addition to Bloodborne. It's to Duelyst. It's phenomenal. Now it means that your general takes no damage until your next turn, which means your opponent cannot go face against you. So if they got all that board, the only way that they can connect with it is by using Dispel via Ephemeral Shroud or Lightbender. These are the only 2 neutral options. In the Vanar Mirror match, Chromatic Cold can proc, and in Lionar, Sunbloom can do it, but those are the only cards that can dispel the tile that would dispel the effect of Concealing Shroud. So if you also combine this with something like White Asp, that means you won't take damage when you swing, and you'll preserve an artifact charge, and which is great. You get more hits out of your artifact. Your opponent can't remove it next turn anyways. So there's a lot of great things about it. It's also phenomenal in the late game when you just need to hold out for a couple more turns to use your Bloodborne spell, ping off that extra damage, deny the opponent the chance to close the game, give yourself more opportunity to draw more cards. It's a great card for the faction, and you have to be a little careful with it because the faction does not have heal. So if you go too low, sometimes it just won't matter if you stall out because your opponent has you surrounded anyways. So it has its downsides, but it's definitely a great card and quite powerful too. Frigid Corona. Turns out this card is actually more powerful than we first expected. A lot of people anticipated this card to be decent, or maybe include in certain niche decks, but it's turned out to be like an addition in just about every Vanguard deck. It cycles itself, because it's not only does it stun an enemy, which includes generals, which is great against Saj, by the way, but since it cycles itself, you get more value out of the card than you otherwise would. For example, get out of an Icy. Let me find him. He's right down here. Oh, I'm on top of him. Icy. It's the 2-mana, 2/3. His opening gambit is stun a nearby enemy, which included the general, but the problem, it was a battle pet, so it took a little bit of the control elements out of it, since his attack, whatever he attacks, might be able to be controlled by the enemy, or go down to a 50-50 or something. If he didn't only have one attack in the cardinal directions. So a lot of downsides, I guess, to playing Icy. But since Frigid Corona did not have the caveat of being a minion that you couldn't control, and could also be played from anywhere on the map, because it has no location restrictions, it's a spell, you can cast it on anything. That means that you can stall out against ranged minions in the corner, against threats that you might be concerned about hitting you, or disrupt the general from taking mana tiles early on in the game as well. So great utility. Has good synergy with the Concealing Shroud strategy, and overall just works well in stalling the game out, prolonging it so we can get more mana. Healing Mystics, a little more healing. Hearth Sisters, great utility, lets us connect, make plays that otherwise wouldn't be able to by moving minions around the map and removing minions from the opponent's side. So staple, and that's the early game that I went with. Enfeeble. Now this card, it's quite exceptional. It makes all minions become 1/1. Now, like I said, it has great synergy with Blood Tier Alchemist, and it also hits your own minions. That means all of your minions are going to be trading together across the board. So if you need like a reset, that's it. You just play that Enfeeble. It deals with anything. I'd like to note that this is also just a very powerful card against things like Ironcliff Guardian, etc. Those big minions that, I have to turn it into a 3/3 anyways and hit it. Well, no, you can turn it into a 1/1 and hit it. And this also bypasses spell shields, so this also hits Mechazor. So now Vanar has another answer for Mechazor besides just Chromatic Cold. You can turn him into a 1/1 and you won't even have to care about him anymore. And this is a transformation effect as well, which means that it bypasses buff spells. And so what that means is Grandmaster Variax from the Abyssian side, if they buff their Wraithlings to 5/5 by using the Grandmaster Variax Bloodborne spell, which is awesome, the 5/5s become 1/1s. Now, if they use that Bloodborne spell again, they are not able to transform back into 5/5s because the buff effect of being Furious, the Furious Wraithling buff, is still on them. So all of those 5/5s get turned into 1/1s permanently. The only way that they can be turned back into 5/5s is if they get like dispelled and then rebuffed. So it's actually better than Lightbender against decks like that, because Lightbender dispels them, sure, puts them at 1/1, but they can just rebuff them back up to 5/5s. So Enfeeble is really strong. Combined with Scorn on 7 mana means full board clear. That includes your own, but hey, Scorn will reign supreme. He'll be the only guy on the board, which is still good for you. For draw in the deck, I went with Sojourner and Spelljammer. Now, it's interesting that people often ask, why did I go for both? And I thought to myself, that is a good question. Now, Sojourner is actually just one of the best openers I can have, going second. And for that reason alone, I really enjoy the card in the deck. But it also forces the opponent to play slightly differently, which is great. If they don't want to give me the card draw, they'll dispel it or they'll remove it, which is pretty disruptive to their flow of the gameplay. Because if you think about it, it's just a 3-mana 1/5. It's not very threatening. It's not pushing lethal or anything like that. It's just a draw card, and that in alone is just a powerful effect in a body that's also going to generate me card value over time. So alongside Spelljammer, which with its retooled stat line to 3/5 has just become a staple in most decks because 4 mana 3/5 is a very, very, very nice stats. It requires the attention of the general and usually any other, and something else to remove, while also generating you card value immediately at the end of your turn. So these two, now oftentimes there are times where I don't want both on the board because it threatens to overdraw. However, I'd rather have the option, I'd rather be saying, whoa, I don't need all these cards, than where are my cards, where are my draw cards? So I gave myself extra room to play with how much card draw I have, so just to make sure that I never run out of options in the playfield. Now, Sojourner or Spelljammer could be experimented with as being a Sworn Sister Lakion as well, but that wasn't something that I was gonna go for. I don't like the RNG element of it, and frankly, the 4 mana it didn't feel like the right fit for the deck. But you're welcome to experiment that yourself. For example, if you don't have Spelljammer but you have crafted the rares, Lakion is definitely an option that could. I could see working well in this slot, regardless of the loss of Spelljammer. The other powerful card here is White Asp. I find I win more games when I play more White Asps. So, being able to answer the opponent's board easily, because it gives you 3 attack on your general, which is really strong. 5 damage early on in the game for only 4 mana. It makes for a very powerful board control. It also generates the Blazing Spine for you on the board, which means that if you kill something like, I'm going to pull up the cards that I want to talk about here. Allomancer. Okay, Allomancer. Now, his Dying Wish is summon a random obelisk on this space, alongside Reaper of the Nine Moons. There he is. Reaper of the Nine Moons. Those types of cards that spawn something underneath them when they die, un-7 as well. I don't think I actually have un-7. Rip un-7. Okay. Yeah, not in this account anyways. Summon a minion with Dying Wish from your action bar. So these types of cards that have things spawn underneath them when they die get overwritten by Blazing Spines. Or with Blazing Spines by White Asp. Also Rebirth minions as well. Now, there are some instances, I believe, that are exceptions to this rule. I think when say an opponent runs a Reaper of the Nine Moons into your face when you have this equipped, I believe they overwrite the Blazing Spine. I have never actually had. I think I only had this happen once, and I can't remember the specific incident, but I believe it has something to do with the play order or the attack order. If it's on their turn, it will overwrite it, like Allomancer attacks in on their turn. So you got to be a little careful of that. But I'm pretty sure that anytime that you attack something, it will always proc the Blazing Spine effect and replace those tiles. So it has that added bonus, and just removing anything in the early game like Silverguard Knights, other people's Spelljammers, Sojourners, those types of cards, getting value out of it, really good. And like I said, good synergy with Concealing Shroud as well to gain value over the course of a couple turns. You know, block damage, keep your artifact, and open yourself up to other plays. Dancing Blades, I decided, was a good power card. It gains you a lot of tempo while also putting a pretty good threat on the board. 4/6 is a nice stat line. It's hard to remove efficiently without wasting resources or having to take face damage to get rid of it. So it's a nice card. Not everybody plays around it. Some people do. The more people that play around it, the less effective it is. However, it still is just a great 5-drop if you can't get the opening gambit off. So trading with the board is powerful. And the finisher that I put in the deck was a 2 of Meltdown. I had 3 of at some point. I decided I was seeing too many of them, or they weren't. I wasn't consistently able to proc its effect enough to warrant 3 in the same deck. So you can experiment with this number if you want. The more early game decks that you'll see, the less impactful this card kind of is. just because of the nature of how those games tend to play out. The opponent tends to play rather aggressively, they take damage, and one meltdown will often finish the game, or you'll maybe even be able to finish them off before meltdown comes out. So this is more of the control finisher. It has a lot of good elements. You use your blood. It has blood surge, deals 7 damage to a random enemy, which that sounds kind of, hey, that's a little RNG. Well, yes, it is, but it's also kind of a controlled RNG because given the deck that we built, we have the ability to remove the opponent's board very effectively at almost all stages of the game, and meltdown can usually come down to a 50-50. You use its effect and it goes between one minion or another, or it goes face, and that is a very powerful effect. It also has the added bonus of having a great stat line of 7/7, so if you play it far away and then you have Hearth Sister to swing it back in, even if it gets dispelled, it's still powerful. So I found that this card was more effective than cards like Pandora or Dark Nemesis, which was an old control Faie type of win condition, just because of it has more impact when you play it. 7 damage is nothing to scoff at, so great finisher and also just great board control. Not many things survive 7 damage. But yeah, that's the deck, guys. I'd say some of the strongest matchups are the mirror match. It has a good Cassiva matchup because we have great stall. It also is very good against Lionar just because of if they're mid-range or control Lionar, you're always going to have the removal for them. It has good decent matchup against Tempo Lionar because you can stall the game out long enough and mess with their tempo and just get to that late stage mana. I also think that it has a great matchup against Songhai, and I would say the worst matchup may be something like Aggro Vath, but even then you have Concealing Shroud and Frigid Corona. So if you don't get caught off guard by a Dispel, which is something Magmar don't typically run, I think you're going to be just fine. Because sometimes they do get those god draws of being able to kill you before you're able to set up shop. And if you weren't careful about Concealing Shrouds in the early game, which sometimes I would keep a Concealing Shroud early on in my opening hand against someone like Starhorn when I anticipate being burned down in the first few turns, just so I could get some early leverage against them and deny them that free damage. If you're not careful in those matchups, you could definitely get caught off guard. But overall, I'd say the deck has very few weak matchups. There's no auto-lose matchups. I think you have a fighting chance against just about every single deck in the game. I've yet to see one that I felt I couldn't win. Vitruvian, you're pretty strong against. Another tip about Enfeeble is hit those obelisks, man. Even on curve, they play that obelisk right there. Boom, get rid of it. Pretty free. So, also, like I said, Frigid Corona is great against Vath and Saj and stuff like that. People who need their generals to do things, me just denying them that, great power. So, no exceptionally weak matchups, just a few more skillfully directive matchups. And yeah, I got a video today for you. I rather enjoyed this game in particular. It was against Pipus Bartus, and it was actually a mirror match of Faie. So I'm going to pull that up. And as you see, this is the deck. Here's the code. This is the deck towards the end of last season. I haven't played this account since last season, but I did want to make a video about this because I really loved this deck. So, without further ado, let's hop in. So we'll go real time, and I'll pause here at the mulligan. So yeah, this video is from last season, so we were both S rank back then. But yeah, so starting hand, I don't need 2 Enfeebles. Now, depending upon what I'd played against previously, I may or may not have replaced the Spelljammer, but I'm almost certain that I would just only replace 1 Enfeeble in a situation like this. And that is simply because I have the 2-drop. I'm probably not going to Frigid Corona turn 1, because I would prefer to go Crystal Cloaker into Spelljammer. because it's more powerful, gains me more pressure on the board. And Enfeeble's not amazing early game because I can't actually reach the minions that they're finishing off, and they're not even putting down that many threats. So replacing just one Enfeeble, looking for things like Scorn and Chromatic Cold to help deal with any pesky Snow Chasers or get rid of Gravity Wells. I replaced both Enfeebles. Okay, yeah. So, for the reasons I said. And I don't think there's a need to replace anything here. Yeah. So, no reason to replace anything when you have a second 2-drop. I like having the second 2-drop because if the opponent removes this one, it means I can't accelerate into the Spelljammer. So having the second Crystal Cloaker is always, a great plan, and that goes for a lot of decks where you are playing a 2-drop into 4-drop type of curve. Being mindful that your opponent could just remove your 2-drop, and then turn 2 you wouldn't have a play. So don't replace the 2-drop just because you think you're always going to have the 4-drop next turn. Be mindful. It's okay to say no to replacing sometimes. And having that Scorn is exactly what we want in this scenario, because the opponent could play Gravity Wells, or they could even be playing Jack's True Sight. Now here is one of the best Faie openers in the game. It's even a good Kara opener, but this is one of the best openers you can have going second against the opponent. Hearth Sister into Blood Tear Alchemist on the mana tile, and Snow Chaser. That is a pretty tough opener to counter. I immediately know that my decision is just going to be to fight for this board. I'm not going to replace anything, and I'm going to get myself some power and force him to fight for the middle of the board. I'm going to play both Crystal Cloakers, one up here, one up here, because he cannot reach them with any of his minions as is. This means that he has to use another resource to get at them, which he spent 3 cards in his opening turn, and this turn he would be much more happy to draw cards or set up a draw engine like a Spelljammer or a Sojourner, something like that, than to be be forced to answer my board. So yeah, there's no reason to replace almost anything. Maybe Spelljammer, but I think I keep that since I'm playing 2 cards this turn. It's looking like I'm only going to have 4 next turn. I'd rather have the option of trading things in and then equalizing with the Spelljammer. So, once again, keeping Scorn for any sort of Gravity Well shenanigans. And Frigid Corona is going to cycle itself anyways, so there's no reason to replace it unless I'm in dire need of an answer immediately. So, can't reach my stuff. What's he gonna do? Now, a couple of things that come to mind are like Hearth Sister is getting advantages by trading his minions into mine with a Hearth Sister, or he can't play Dancing Blades right now. I made sure that not only was this unable to be reached by Hearth Sister, so I played it on the top wall. He can't step onto the mana tile and then play Dancing Blades here, where my Crystal Cloakers would be. Cannot move anything. So overall, it's kind of just like a your move type of thing. Excuse me. He decides to just develop a Sunsteel Defender, which it's a pretty good call. It's gonna do 4 damage to something. He decides that he doesn't want to do. I'll pause this and talk through this turn. Meltdown is it's too early to say if I'll be able to guarantee myself a Meltdown value, so I'd rather look for another option like Aspect of the Fox, Chromatic Cold, something that would make this turn a little bit more efficient for me in terms of removal. But it's looking to be like a Scorn turn and a trade-in of some type, because Scorn kills the Blood Tier, hits the bubble. Right, so we pull the second Scorn, which is great. It makes this play feel less all in, because if, for example, the opponent were to set up Gravity Wells again on the next turn, Scorn may or may not be necessary. So I decided to Scorn, take the hit with my general, keep this Crystal Cloaker on the board, and just start advancing on him. Drawing that aspect feels good in case it were to be another strong minion. So it looks like it's going to be a Hearth Sister Bloodborne spell from him, which is one of our key strategies as well. That's why we were playing around Bloodborne Warbird all the time. And he does in fact have the Gravity Well. Now, I actually decided to go for something. At this stage, I wasn't sure how his deck was playing out. Sunsteel Defender, I hadn't really seen a whole lot of those lately. And the way he positioned himself towards this side of the map and tried to Gravity Well going into 6 mana had me concerned for Jack's True Sight, which is a very common, tech for Faie when they can play cards like Razorback. And if they're playing Gravity Wells, that's kind of indicative of playing Razorback sometimes. So I wanted to play this turn a little safe, and rather than all in with the Scorn, because it looks like Scorn and clear, right? That looks like a reasonable play. Well, I couldn't position the Scorn close enough to him that I was comfortable letting this turn go that way. So while you think about it, you Scorn and hit with the Crystal Cloaker and hit with this and BBS, and it's like, yeah, sure. Well, my Crystal Cloaker would die, which means I'd be pushing 5 damage this turn with BBS. BBS hit, I'd be 7 damage. It'd be 2, 4, 6, 7. So we'd be at 9 HP, but my Scorn would be here. This is the best location. So this is the type of play that you make on an educated guess. You say, my opponent could be playing Jack's True Sight. And if I were to all in this Scorn, it's my only other Scorn in the deck, and I all in this play, put him to 9 HP, he could run away from my Scorn, drop Jack's, and he'd be at 9 HP, and my Bloodborne spell would be up, and I'd have 4 damage, so it might not be a good enough play for him, but I didn't want to risk the off chance that he would stall the game out with Frigid Coronas and if I wasn't able to finish it off and just die to Razorback. So I went with this educated guess, the best guess I could think of, and just decided that these Gravity Wells were not going to threaten me, and he wouldn't Razorback just a couple of Gravity Wells. So I can clear 2 of them. So I know that I'm not playing Scorn, so I decide to Frigid Corona him to avoid him from hitting me, playing any type of artifact effect. I decide that the Chromatic Cold is best used to deny the 3 damage on my face, because I want this game to go long. I don't want to take any unnecessary damage. I feel comfortable with 1 Chromatic Cold being spent to kill a 2-drop. That's okay. We're still pushing 2 damage and denying him any sort of positioning. His whole turn is Azure Herald now. That's not bad for me. It's not bad. It makes me think that he's not playing Jack's True Sight anymore, and I might have missed an opportunity to push a lot of face damage. But I also decided that, I went for the slow route. I'm just going to take advantage of this. Now, one of the things I think I did wrong here was I hit the Azure Herald rather than the face, which ultimately resulted in this Dancing Blades being high value. But it did put 2 damage on the Azure Herald, so it wasn't like a bad play, but it wasn't like this Azure Herald wasn't a great threat. So if in the same position and you decided to go face, I would say that might even be more correct. Now, this position has now turned a little scary for me. What was okay 2 turns in a row is now, hey, I'm still dealing with these Gravity Wells. I'm not doing anything. It's now, I should have used that Scorn. And it's starting to make me think that, you know what, I'm just going to hold on to the Scorn with the Enfeeble combo rather than go all in on it now, because that would kill my Spelljammer and this unit isn't that threatening right this minute because I have the Frigid Corona. I would much rather just have the ability to remove his whole board at any given situation, in any given scenario. Now, rather than go all in on it now and possibly fall flat, since he has the health advantage again, because he's running the Azure Herald, and neither of us have played any Concealing Shrouds. So not knowing his deck is forcing me to play slightly more passive. So that Scorn turn a few turns ago where we might have pushed him to 9 HP, looking pretty okay at this stage. But, we did make our guess based on what we thought they might be playing. So my general had to hit the Gravity Well, so I decided that I just don't want to give him any options for Aspect of the Mountains, try and play around Dancing Blades again a little bit, and strike with the Spelljammer. Aspect of the Mountains on a Dancing Blades is okay for me, since it gets rid of the 4/6 and makes it a 5/5. Now it does get rid of this, but it's the same minion that he had already on the board, so it's more or less just a trade-off. So I decided that it was not worth playing around too much. Now this one caught me really off guard. Zenrui. I have not seen a Zenrui in so long, so power to him for recognizing that play, the value of this card for this play. But this situation is not that dire. Like I said, the turn before we held on to the Enfeeble Scorn combo, and this looks like good enough value to me. Unfortunately, it's going to kill the Spelljammer. I can't remove this board in any other manner. I think I also... So, like, I could have pushed one weird damage with this Blood Tear, but I decided just to sacrifice the Spelljammer for good positioning on the Blistering Scorn, and rather than utilize the Blood Tear Alchemist to push damage, just use the Bloodborne spell. Pushes 2 damage over 1. We're very healthy. Card value is equivalent. We have the board. But this is Dancing Blades number 2. Dancing Blades number 2, Snow Chaser in tow, and a Blood Tear Alchemist? Oh, man. Oh, man. Even though he used most of his hand for this play, it's still looking pretty good for him because he just regained the board completely and I'm in no position to push damage. So immediately realizing I cannot play both Dancing Blades this turn, and I'm unlikely to play multiple Dancing Blades for value. I decided to Blood Tear the Snow Chaser so I can get myself into better positioning. And while this turn seems awkward, it's more or less just one of those turns that you have to do in order to regain positioning on your opponent. Utilizing Concealing Shroud, pushing 2 face damage, guaranteeing that the Dancing Blades will die no matter what to the board. So it's looking like he will trade the Dancing Blades and the Blood Tear in, but this is just the best positioning I could get in order to not only deal damage to the Dancing Blades and deal with it, but also in order to push some face damage, or to set myself up for some face damage on him. He actually... He takes a big gamble here. Takes a really big gamble. He uses every card in his hand. Uses every card in his hand to put me to 2 HP. That sets up lethal with Warbird if I don't have any healing. I don't have Chromatic Cold. My only gamble here now, on my end, is to walk away and 50-50 it, in some sense. If he doesn't have Chromatic Cold or something, he can't kill me, and he's just gonna die next turn. He does not top deck it. He does not top deck the lethal. However, he did find a card that will stall the game out, just slightly. And, but we have lethal ourselves. It's just a matter of I attack this one attacks that one, this guy attacks. Alright, this one doesn't even need to be attacked, because we can Aspect of the Fox it. Aspect of the Fox that 0-1. Trade in 3, 1, 4. Bloodborne spell is lethal. So, very close game. He had the chance to top deck his lethal, but we came out on top, and I think we were more hopeful that game than he ever was, just because of the fact that we were almost always ahead, even in the late game. He played that first Concealing Shroud against us, but we played that first Concealing Shroud against him, and he had his own in response. But I think the fact that he ignored the board forced the hand to lose. So I don't disagree that him pushing for lethal with the Bloodborne spell was the wrong play. We got a little lucky by having that Healing Mystic, but it was definitely one of those matches that you got to feel good about winning, because you feel like you made some of the right decisions. So, yeah, guys, that's going to be it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this edition of Metadectic, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Yeah, take care.